So what is Smartify? As Leslie said, well, Smartify is the most downloaded museum app in the world. The reason for that is really, as you probably know, museums have been experimenting with building apps for quite a long time. The idea that instead of renting those traditional audio guides where you kind of plug in the headphones and you're typing in the numbers, the idea that actually you could just use your supercomputer that everybody has in their pockets now, the smartphone, as a way to get information rather than kind of those physical rented audio guide devices. And thank you, that's perfect, Josh. If you just skip down to the 5th slide, which is about, yeah, thank you. That's great. Yeah, pause there for a second. So with Smartify, the idea was that instead of downloading a different app every time you go to a different museum, so you go to the Louvre, you download the Louvre app, you go to the Rijksmuseum, you download the Rijksmuseum app, and then you end up kind of deleting it a couple of weeks later because it's just taking up too much space on your phone. The idea was that actually it could be a single platform in the same way that we use Spotify or we use Uber or we use Netflix to access a range of content across multiple venues or multiple content providers, that it would work as a platform in the same way. So because of that, it works across the National Galleries of Scotland, as you mentioned. It works at the Kelvingrove Museum, the National Gallery in London, the Smithsonian. So major museums all over the world use a Smartify platform, and for that reason people keep it on their phones because they know they can kind of reuse it again every time they're planning a cultural visit. So yeah, and as Josh said, we created Smartify to be a social enterprise. I think we were very much inspired by the likes of Spotify and the likes of Netflix to kind of offer that user control and give basically the users and the audiences full control over the experience and a really kind of easy journey. But as we all know, there are a lot of things about kind of major tech platforms that we don't like so much. The way that kind of data is centralized, the way that they can then kind of control and monetize that for their own gain, often at the expense of the content providers. And as a person who kind of comes from the museum sector myself, and wanted to create something of value both to museums as well, because museums are obviously charities, we really wanted to make something where the data is actually going back to the museums, as well as the money that we make as a platform is being reinvested in obviously the growth of the platform and making sure that it continues to meet the needs of our customers and of the museums basically. So we work very much in partnership with them, and for example the product roadmap, the way that we develop new features is always in collaboration with museums. So for example, the eShop work that we've been doing during COVID-19 has been developed in partnership with the National Galleries of Scotland and National Gallery in London in a very collaborative way. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to show you a few kind of the key features that Smartify does, and I would really encourage you to download the app. It's free on the app stores, so if you just type in Smartify you'll see it across Android, iOS, and we're launching a web app in a couple of weeks, but at the moment on Android and iOS. So the visit tab is what you'd expect when you launch it. If you would like to put your geolocation into Smartify, you don't have to, but if you do, then you're going to get kind of content that's very much located to where you are. And the benefit of that, again, because it's a platform approach, is that if you're near a museum, so let's say I'm visiting Scotland, you're going to get a notification, a pop-up that says there's this new exhibition of Ray Harryhausen at the National Galleries of Scotland. Check in to see that now. So you're kind of getting those geolocated prompts in the way that we're used to getting for things like Google or Uber. So that's the kind of the visit page. If you just go to the next slide. The explore page of the app is a lot more focused on kind of what's trending near you. So it's a place for discovery. We find a lot of people use this more when they're off-site, so at home browsing. And yeah, it's basically things that are trending nearby, artists, exhibitions, venues. So just a more general place for discovery rather than location-based. Next slide. Tours is obviously a really important thing. So the tours feature of Smartify is very much like a kind of Spotify playlist type of experience. You have check in at the venue, and then you can get the multimedia tour, and that can be video or audio guides. The way that these are built is really simple, actually. The back end of Smartify is a dashboard, and you can just drag and drop your media files. So one of the things that we heard a lot at the beginning of Smartify was, museums who kind of produced audio content where they didn't own the rights, even that it was being put onto these kind of devices, and it was hard to change the guides. And actually, we know from using Instagram and things that you actually need to kind of a lot more control over content and edit it really easily. So the way that these tours are built is kind of in a very simple dashboard that's on the back end of the platform. The next one is geolocation. I already spoke about that. So basically getting push notifications, which is a really good way to kind of notify people if they're near something of interest, to check in at that venue. The next one is digital membership. Again, we know about membership cards. So having basically a digital membership card that you can put into your Apple Wallet is something that the Smithsonian really wanted. So we developed that kind of in collaboration with them. And now, given what's happening with COVID-19, there's a lot of work being done to kind of extend that offering out to, VIP content and access to additional tours, additional talks and that sort of thing. Donations is, it says what it says in the tin, it's using Apple Pay. So that's an integration that we do through to museums' websites. And multi-languages is the final one that I wanted to highlight. Obviously, one of the key things that's really great about a digital wall label over like a physical wall label is that it's a flexible digital space. So you can basically have the app functions in every single language, and as long as you have kind of content in different languages, it will appear there, or it will default to English if you only have English. But it means that the app, all of the buttons, all of the kind of app architecture will appear in that correct language. And the other thing, I suppose, about a digital wall label is accessibility more broadly. So one of the things that we get a lot of Smartify users is just kind of because it's using the app's native functionality. So let's say if you have larger size font turned on, if you have a screen reader turned on, that's all going to function directly through the app. So a lot of people who find it difficult to read wall labels, or for example, if they're in a wheelchair and they're further away, they can just tap on the text and have it kind of read out to them, and have the font much larger. So it's actually a kind of a helpful thing for people with low vision as well. So yeah, I guess thinking about COVID-19, one thing actually I didn't mention in terms of the features, which is kind of what Smartify is, I suppose, known for, although we don't tend to highlight it as a feature because we feel that it's kind of well, anyway, it's the scanning technology, which I actually have a video in my other set of slides, which is in the PDF version, which that's where you would have seen that. But basically, the scanning technology is kind of like that Shazam for art feature that you hold up the camera of your phone and it will identify whatever's in front of you and pull the information immediately. That's, I guess, one thing that people really love about Smartify, because it feels very instantaneous, and it still feels quite magic, to be honest, when people just hold up the camera and get access to all the information directly. So you can search by typing, you can search by putting in the accession number or the number of the stops in a more traditional guide sense, but you can also search by visual search. And that's a really great feature, and I would encourage you, when you download the app and have a play, you'll be able to scan that. One question in the notes, can you search by museum? Yeah, absolutely. So that will happen automatically by the geolocation feature, but also just by typing in the venue, by typing in an exhibition. You can also search by the speaker of an audio guide. So if I want to find the Mary Beard guide. So all of those are search terms that are programmed in and will kind of appear as soon as you start searching. Right, so in terms of COVID-19, I mean, I don't have to really tell this group, about kind of the cuts and the difficulties in the sector at the moment. I think pretty much everybody's aware of that now. One thing that's been very obvious is that there are no established digital business models in the visitor attraction sector, or very, very few. So, once you haven't got those kind of visitor services like the shop, like obviously ticketing, the cafe and that sort of thing, there's not a lot that, a lot of people are struggling to understand how they can monetize things online. And as we know, the world's 85,000 museums are looking to kind of lose about 80% of their revenue this year, which is, really worrying about kind of closures. And in the US, I know a lot of museums have already closed. So yeah, basically, as I mentioned, this kind of long-term underinvestment in digital, which is a combination of obviously just not having enough government funds, but also the fact that digital technology is very expensive to build, which is another reason why we decided to build it as a platform so that we could offer it at very low rates, up to a wider audience. Because of that underinvestment, yeah, there isn't really an online membership offer for a lot of museums. There isn't really kind of e-commerce in a very advanced state. Some museums will have a shop on their website, but it's kind of sometimes hard to actually know to search on a museum website for the shop. And there isn't that targeted engagement with visitors kind of before, during, and after a visit. So the during is great in terms of that physical experience, a visitor experience, but what happens before, what happens after, how do we target a visitor again? And then, yeah, obviously changes to the actual physical experience have also been necessary on top of that in terms of removing the paper maps, removing the guides and the interactives. So what we've been doing, well, the first thing that we worked on, which was a kind of the very immediate thing that museums were asking us for, is basically, can we replace our existing audio guides with Smartify, which was already happening, but happening far more during the past year. If you go down to the next slide. And you can see there a picture from the National Gallery on the left, which says, connect to our Wi-Fi, download Smartify for free to support your visit. So as part of their wayfinding, they're basically asking people to use their phones with Smartify to access all that information. So the idea being that, you just hold your phone, you scan the artwork, and you've got all the information in your phone, done. On the right hand side of the screen, you can see the Belvedere there, which is a very lovely palace in Vienna. If anyone's visited, it's a really great place. Again, similar thing. So for them, it wasn't just paintings, obviously it was sculptural items, and it's a palace, so there's lots of architecture also that people are scanning there. So that was kind of the first thing that came up, requests from our customers. But the second thing that really followed was the e-shop. So that idea that actually when you scan an artwork, instead of just getting the text, that you can also get, see what's related to that item in the shop. So if you scan the whistle jacket, you'll see, the mug, the handbag, all of those things immediately, and that you can actually click them there and purchase them on the spot through your phone. We're going to user journeys for this, one being that you get it delivered to your home via an online delivery, and the other being a click and collect, where you can then go down to the shop and pick it up. This is obviously responding to the fact that less people are going into the shops. You don't want kind of people touching lots of things, but at the same time, if you can have that kind of click and collect, a little bit like an Argos type of experience, where you kind of order and then pick it up, that would stop kind of the overcrowding in the shop. So this is a feature that we started working on a couple of months ago. It's going to launch at the end of this month, with some kind of user testing rounds at the National Gallery of Scotland and the National Gallery in London, and then it will be going rolled out kind of, as a feature that all of our partners can use. Again, coming back to that platform approach where, once the feature is developed, it can go to everybody who's on the app. So that's the e-shop. I suppose, longer term, I can share a little bit about what we're working on for next year, which is this kind of wider membership offer with digital virtual galleries online and sort of that sort of experience. You've probably seen a lot of virtual galleries online. I'm personally very cynical about a lot of it. I think it doesn't really match up to the physical experience, and I think people want a very different experience online. So we've been doing a lot of research on that, about what that membership offer is, and you'll see some of that kind of educational content and kids workshops going on online within Smartify in kind of the early next year, early 2021. If you could go to the next slide, Josh. So I really wanted to open up now. I didn't really want to talk for too long. So I had kind of 3 questions, and I hope maybe some of you might kind of join me in the chat and we can discuss it together, or perhaps even come into the conversation on video as well. But before I open up the conversation, I'll just go through your questions to see if there were anything that I missed on there. So is there a function to connect items and exhibitions across a museum at all? That's from Stuart. Yes, there is that functionality. A lot of artworks that we have in the platform are actually, for example, if they're photographs or they're traveling, they're on loans, then they might be in 2 exhibitions at the same time. So we always try to make sure that there's one source of truth in terms of the artwork, so we don't put multiple, like the same artwork in multiple venues, but that actually it can have multiple interpretations at the same time, or the museums are speaking to each other in terms of what that interpretation is. And you mentioned on scanning or looking at Exhibit A, it suggests other similar exhibits to do with a similar period. Yes, this is the most exciting thing for me, to be honest, Stuart, in terms of recommendations. The idea that, we're used to it with every other kind of digital service that we use, Netflix, Spotify, as I said, my favorite thing is on Monday when I get my Spotify Discover weekly playlist about all the songs that they think I'm going to like. And yeah, in the art world, that doesn't really exist. There isn't that kind of single platform that says you like Renaissance art. So yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, and we spend a lot of time kind of tagging the artworks to try and help people, basically to try and personalize those recommendations a lot more while still offering surprise and delight as well. So that's definitely something that we're working on. I'm just moving down the questions here. Sylvia,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go on, John.
No, I was going to try and help you out, but I was actually making it more difficult, so I'll let you carry on.
No, go for it. If you read them, that would be great.
Yeah, so it was from Sylvia, who said, has the app been used in context other than museums? So, for example, food tours, music tours, or natural heritage?
Yeah, so it has been used in other venues. We have quite a broad view of kind of culture. So we haven't just worked with, in terms of different museums, we work with social history museums, natural history museums, palaces, historic houses, to places like Waterston Manor, National Trust properties, that sort of thing. Because it will still work. So we do have quite a broad range in terms of culture. We've also worked with some restaurants and hotels where they had things that, artworks in general, but also sculpture trails or street art, where they wanted people to be able to access that information and kind of follow a tour to kind of get a deeper understanding of the local area. So yeah, we've worked on quite a few different projects, and as long as it falls into the broader sense of kind of culture and tourism, rather than we wouldn't do kind of scanning Coke bottles or kind of commercial applications of it, but as long as it's cultural content related, then we're happy to kind of include it in the platform.
Okay, so the next one has come from Mark, which is, he really likes the app, so that's good. But also, what's the average user's use? Do they scan all the paintings or a fraction of the paintings for each visit? It does depend on the collection, museum, or location. Do you get to understand things like tourist versus local resident? And how are museums also using the data?
Yeah,
there's quite a lot.
There's quite a lot in there to unpack. I should have put some of our data slides on here actually, so sorry about that, and I can send over some examples if you're interested. So in terms of user data, you can use the app as a guest, so leaving kind of no email address or anything, or you can create an account. So a little bit like I keep on mentioning Spotify, you can hear from the name Smartify that we're very inspired by Spotify. But if you create an account, you put your email address in, you have an account with Smartify, and then you can access that content whether you log out, log in on the website. So there are different places where you can see all the artworks that you scanned and favorited. So in terms of the anonymous data that we provide to museums, that's basically usage data. So what did people scan? What were the most trending artworks? Where were people kind of coming from? Because the phone obviously has a country ID. So there's kind of basic data that we can provide. In general, I mean, there isn't really a general number because each museum is different and have different kinds of visitors. So I suppose a normal amount of time spent in the app during a visit would be about 20 minutes. If there's an audio guide, sometimes it's slightly longer. But we see a lot of people actually scanning things to kind of, identify them and save them, but then they look back at them and read the text later on. And we can tell if people are scanning, obviously on site or accessing the content, at home later on. So that's the kind of data that we're reporting back onto museums. And then if we put a data sharing agreement in place, we can also share the email addresses of visitors to your venue. So we wouldn't share Smartify users who, you know, went to the RA and then share that email address with the National Galleries of Scotland, but we would be able to share just those National Galleries of Scotland email addresses so they could include them in their newsletters and things like that. Sorry, go on, Josh.
No, I was just going to say, one of the weirdest uses of Smartify I personally did was during the sort of lockdown quiz explosion. We had to dress up like a particular painting, so I used the Smartify app to try and find a painting that I could dress up into, and I didn't win, but it was a good interesting use of the app, at least.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you report that back to a museum? What's the usage? Yeah, interesting. Yeah, but if anyone wants to see any kind of anonymized analytics and the sort of thing that we're producing, I'm happy to send over emails afterwards. So, you know, if you grab my email address, I can send that over.
Great. So we have a few more questions coming in, so I'll just quickly go through them. So first one is from Sally, who's asked about forward planning and allowing users to create a program for a visit, so when they can go through the app and understand the things they want to see. So that's the first question. I'll do a second one as well, which is from Ian Harrier-Watt, who has asked about your journey as an entrepreneur, especially with your museum background and then going into developing this platform.
Yeah, so in terms of the first question, like preparing a visit before you you go, we do find that people are looking at things on Smartify before they go, and we have an offline capacity. So if you want to download a whole venue beforehand to get like the tour and make sure that you have kind of all of that extra content. So for example, with National Galleries of Scotland, we've worked on an AR experience, which you can, you know, play with beforehand. So yeah, we do see people downloading venues. However, in general, most people still kind of, you know, they don't think that far in advance. They kind of get to the site and they see, oh, I can use Smartify here. There's a label or there's like a QR code to download it right then, and they kind of kick off using it on site and kind of using that scanning technology rather than kind of an offline mode. But yeah, we have both really. In terms of kind of preparing, in terms of kind of thinking about your visit more in terms of what you want to see and planning that way, that's something that we're working on. It's connected to the AI thing that I mentioned, that one of the other questions about kind of personalization. That what the goal that we're getting to, that we're aiming for is you know, let's say I'm a parent, I want my kids to, that my kids are learning about the ancient Greeks in school, you know, it's part of the syllabus, and I want to go to the British Museum and give them a kind of very unique experience that's focused on the ancient Greeks. So how do I kind of input that profile and then get suggested the kind of the key items to see in a specific venue, or the key items to see across, you know, various venues that you can explore. So that's something that, you know, we feel doesn't really exist, that kind of personalized visit, and that's what we, you know, are working towards with this tagging and with this kind of platform approach. Not there yet, though.
So yeah,
oh, and the second question, yeah, the second question about my journey. Yeah, I suppose. Well, you know, I worked in arts education, and then basically my team, so we're 4 co-founders, myself and 3 guys who are much more techie than me, and they all loved visiting museums and kind of wanted to create a kind of Shazam for art, you know, that kind of identify something using your phone, and kind of frustrated by the typical audio guides that kind of were very prescriptive. So one of those co-founders was doing an MBA in business studies, and I happened to know the professor and was kind of talking about this idea that I was coming from a museum perspective, and he actually just introduced us, and then we decided to work on it together. I think in terms of that journey, you know, my advice to anyone who wants to start something is just kind of don't wait, and the second piece of advice is that there are really no mistakes. Particularly during times like COVID-19, it's a really good time. It's not a good time to be selling things. It's a good time to be making things. So we've been using this time to, you know, think a lot about the future of the platform and doing a lot of design work. And I think, you know, in market downturns, that's actually really good times to start businesses.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. And we've got still loads of questions, which is great. Thanks everybody for writing them in. You mentioned a little bit before around sort of, and your background being education and museums. How is the app being used, or is the app being used in sort of any educational school programs?
Yeah, so I mean, we get messages from teachers a lot who are using it, and we obviously that's lovely. We haven't done any kind of formal programs, just because we haven't had really the, you know, we focused on the B2B market growth in terms of museums, because that was kind of the fastest way to actually build out the platform, make sure that it was serving our kind of key target audience, which is the museum sector. And now, obviously, we're thinking a lot more about schools, but you know, I know how hard it is to kind of get into schools, get into teachers' kind of, you know, curriculums and the work that is involved in that. So yeah, it's part of that kind of next iteration of Smartify for like online learning resources, and that is something that we're talking about a lot. But we haven't done any kind of programming specifically for teachers as of yet, but we know that a lot do use it. A lot of students use it also just for their own personal study, particularly art history students, because of that scanning technology. Again, you know, if they're like reading a book and they see a picture in that book, they'll scan it just to kind of log it with all the museum data for their kind of revision. A lot of people also, a weird one was that happened this year was Animal Crossing allowed you to kind of put artworks in your Animal Crossing Nintendo game, and there was like this part of the game where you had to say if it was like a fake or a real artwork, and people were using Smartify to identify their Animal Crossing quiz. Anyway, so yeah, we get a lot of things like that.
That's quite eclectic use cases. We have another question here, and it's from Andrea, and it's about the loss of revenue for so many of these museums and galleries. And we saw the e-shop, but is there any other ways that you're seeing how the app is potentially supporting that revenue growth?
Yeah, I mean, the shop is the key one, and I mentioned it before because, you know, museums haven't had digital business models. So it's one thing to kind of digitalize an existing business model, which is what the e-shop is essentially. It's kind of, you know, that already exists, and we're just trying to kind of almost create another marketing channel so that when people are engaging with a specific artwork, they're then encouraged to purchase based on, you know, that if they're interested in that artwork. That's not really a new business model. That's that's the same thing really. It's just e-commerce. Thinking of new models, I think it has to be around kind of virtual engagement. I do think kids and families are a really strong market. I mean, you've seen it, even with e-shops, you know, often a lot of purchases are to do with kids, you know, craft activities or learning activities for kids. You know, people are willing to kind of pay more money when it comes to their children's education. So in terms of then building out that model, I think, you know, being able to offer like virtual classroom visits, even on Zoom or something, is I've seen, you know, museums doing that successfully, and then kind of talks for older audiences. And that's certainly something that we're looking at for Smartify, you know, of being able to offer a kind of educational subscription that then goes back to the museums via the app. That's part of what we're building out for next year. But I think that's something that museums haven't done, and it's a shame actually, because at the moment a lot of kind of the education stuff a lot of those are also temporary contracts, so that's actually where a lot of redundancies are. But I do think that content growth is actually where the sector can create online business models.
It's such a big challenge at the moment. Actually, Sally, who's got another question, myself and her have been setting up an event for Friday around tours and digital to try and explore some of those business models, but I know that everyone's sort of struggling with that a little bit. I'll go back to the questions because there's a fair few coming in. We've got a more technical one from Mark, who asks about does the museum's collections database plug into the app's dashboard?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Does the museum's collections database plug into the app's dashboard?
Yes.
Mark, yes, so go ahead.
So we just tried to sit Smartify as like a kind of a thin layer on top of the on top of your collections database. The worst thing in the world for us is if you ever have to do like a lot of manual data entry, unless it's like obviously creative for the tour or something that's kind of adding extra that you want to do within Smartify. But we try to do all that indexing automatically. It's a very rare case where we don't do that, and also kind of keeping it up to date. So if you take things off the wall, that goes through into Smartify as well, so we always know where the location is. and often we'll do that on like a weekly or monthly basis, that kind of connection point.
So Sally asked a question around, have you thought about incorporating the reviews of exhibitions and or research from those who are wanting sort of even more depth to their experience? And Sally, do feel free to just put on the camera and ask it in more detail if you want to, but have you thought about incorporating reviews?
So we really want to open up. I spoke before about digital wall labels being more accessible, you know, multiple languages, but also multiple interpretations, right? I think we're seeing at the moment the polarization in kind of these culture wars that are happening, and the idea that museums shouldn't just be the only people to interpret objects anymore, that we need to have kind of, you know, different interpretations, different people, different voices. It's a really exciting area. And even just thinking about reviews, you know, it would be great to have kind of, you know, Wolgompus or Waldemar Janacek's kind of, you know, version of Artemisa Gentileschi, because oftentimes they're far more engaging for the average user than just the database label. So yes, we are trying to include those kind of things, but we're doing it. It's taken a lot of research and time, because obviously museums are also kind of hesitant to open up, and we don't want it to turn into like a YouTube comments board. That would be the absolute kind of worst thing. I think everybody kind of can see the dangers there. So we want to make sure that we're offering content that is really quality and that adds something to the interpretation. So yeah, I think also though that, you know, with an apps, the best apps are simple apps. They do kind of simple functions, you know, like Google, you want to know where you're going to go, or Tinder, you just want to find a date. So, you know, they have simple functions that do them really well. I don't think Smartify has to be everything for museums. You know, we'll still go to news websites to read reviews, you know, travel websites to find out other things. So we try to make sure that it's kind of doing a specific job as well.
Yeah. I've only got 5 minutes left, and there's a really good question coming in from Ian. There's a few other questions around some of the analytics, and I think you've probably answered a bit of that, and maybe some of the reports might answer those. So, Ian, is it right if you put your camera on and just ask it in person? Because it's quite a long one, and I think it'd benefit from your telling. Anton,
yeah, hi, Josh. Hi.
Hello.
It's been really interesting. I mean, the lottery fund, the Heritage Lottery Fund, are running kind of a huge heritage digital kind of upskilling program at the minute for the sector, and I'm interested in sort of where you've found challenges of working with the sector, with different organisations, particularly smaller organisations, in just being able to conceptualise what you could do for them. So where you still see this kind of skills gap.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's a really hard one, because while we all know that museums are so underfunded, and there's often one person doing multiple hats, and it's just kind of everything they can do just to kind of keep the website going and keep the, you know, social media going and that sort of thing. So that's the challenge really. And you know, with Smartify, we've always tried to make it as simple as possible, and I think a lot of our partners would say that you know, obviously there's that kind of basic fee, which even actually for museums it can be even too much, even £1,000 for the year, but even that can be quite a lot for a small museum. But once that's then there, we're really good at kind of just integrating the database, kind of taking on that work within Smartify, and we you know, in the tours thing, then it's a very easy user interface again to kind of create tours. So I wouldn't say that we're kind of trying to upskill the sector, because that would be quite a lot to take on. But if by providing very simple tools that are quite low cost, I think we've helped museums achieve more than they thought they, you know, kind of keep up. They feel that they're keeping up with the large museums. You know, smaller museums can have the same system that the National Gallery has, and that, I think that does mean a lot in terms of, you know, offering access to kind of cutting edge tools. But yeah, I wouldn't say that we are upskilling the sector, because I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there just in terms of broader education. I know that like the ACE Digital Champions, that's an amazing scheme. I think those guys are doing great work on that. But at the end of the day, it's just about funding, isn't it? Like, funding and kind of being able to bring in really good digital talent into the sector. That's the issue.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left. So Anna, I just wanted to ask if there's anything else you wanted to just mention just as we come to a close.
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks everyone for the input and for kind of all the questions. As I said, I'm really happy to answer anything else via email. I think Leslie's going to send out my email address after this meeting. And I think, as I said, that if you check out our website, you can see like the pricing, you can see what we do. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I said to Leslie also that we're offering during COVID, we've been offering a free pilot for up to 6 months. So if you want to just try creating a tour on the platform and see how it goes, you can absolutely do that. And for more kind of a more robust presence on the app in terms of like a full data integration, we are offering 20% off all of our membership tiers for the Traveltech community. So yeah, Leslie will send more details around about that afterwards, which you're welcome to get in touch with me about.
Well, just a huge thank you for joining us this morning and for being so patient as we failed to get your slides in the right way. I realised when I showed my screen I had all of my tabs, which is about 200 of them at the top. So it gives a sense of my organisational skills. But no, it was absolutely brilliant. And I think one thing just through the few interactions I've had with some of your team in the tech side as well, is just it's a really impressive thing that you're doing. And it must have been a hugely challenging few months, but also very rewarding. And hopefully, it sounds like the guys at Blair Athol are really keen already. So that's really good it's good to know. My final thought is I want to get my hands on the top trumps from National Gallery. That caught my eye in your slides as a purchase. I'll have to wait for the eShop to do that. So thank you so much for being part of this and for all the great offers you've already given to the Traveltech community and so on. We certainly hope to have you as part of our Traveltech community. Next week, we've got another event with Quenchable. So if you'd like to anyone who's here to sign up to that, thank you all for joining us. And we'll certainly share your email around, Anna, so that other businesses and organisations that want to start using Smartify will be able to do so. So thanks to everyone for being a part of this.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, just to say that we do have information from Anna and Smartify about the offer, and we'll get that out on a blog. Make sure you're signed up to our e-newsletter and all our channels so that you don't miss it. Anna, it's been great. I'm inspired to go and download the app right now. And really sorry for some of the people who didn't manage to get access. They had problems getting onto the call. And for those who left early, but sorry about the technical difficulties. We'll have to see what the recording looks like, as long as it's not with all Josh's open computer windows. But we'll see what we can do. And it was really great to have you with us today, Anna. And I'm sure we'll probably have to do a follow-up at some point. And thanks for all the fantastic questions as well. So thank you very much. And yeah, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.